Hello, and welcome to this session, Developing for Developers, Path to Fame, Money, and Happiness. That might sound like a very bombastic title, but I truly believe in it, and you'll soon see what I'm talking about. My name is Raman Sharma. I work on the DigitalOcean team. Throughout my career, I've been associated with developer tools and services in some way or the other. First, as a user when I was a software developer early in my career, and then as a product manager working at Microsoft for Visual Studio developer tools, and then most recently doing product marketing for cloud services, first in Microsoft Azure and now for DigitalOcean. I'm very passionate about this developer space. We should explain why I work at DigitalOcean. I just feel like in the past decade or so, the whole developer tools and services space has exploded, and there's a renewed energy in this space, and hence this session. Okay, so let's start. Let's talk about why build a developer-focused business, why you should consider doing it. Aren't there 10,000 different things to do with your life? And maybe the answer is no. If you look at the demand for learning development skills in the world today, it's mind-boggling. There are more people who want to learn coding, development, problem solving, application building skills than ever before in our lifetime. In fact, if you include folks like analysts, researchers, designers, data scientists, in the definition of developers, the number is supposed to cross 100 million over the next few years. And this is not really exaggerated in a sense, because the definition of a developer is somebody who puts logic together to solve a problem or to build a utility or to build an application. And all of these people, all of these disciplines in some way or the other are doing exactly that. So what does this tell us? Like in terms of 100 million people being there looking for a certain kind of a skill, certain kind of learning, means that learning and training around development and coding, around programming in itself is a big business opportunity. You don't necessarily need to build like development environments or cloud services. Many companies these days are actually just putting out a lot of content, to attract people and then attract all those visitors and all those users to their real products, which could be something else. There are companies that are making huge business out of just providing training around development skills, around preparing for technical interviews at software companies, technology companies. Many of you might have heard of LeetCode, perfect example. Recently, we heard of this upcoming company called White Hat Junior in India, which is providing programming and development skills to kids, online, entirely online through live coaching sessions. Fascinating. These are all companies who are making just good use of all the demand being there in the market. And one of the reasons why we see such a huge demand around development skills in the market is also because of the multitude of developer platforms that are available today for developers to come and express their creativity around in forms of apps, services. So things like client operating systems, PC, Mac, phones, tablets, watches, smartwatches, all those. Similarly, web is the biggest development platform if there one ever was. Cloud, all of these are actually avenues for developers to come and build applications. And once you start building applications for these platforms, you realize that you need a lot of associated machinery, whether it is tools to write code, whether it is libraries, APIs to perform certain tasks, or cloud to run your backend applications. All of these things are opportunities to help these developers so that they can compose their applications together using all the different services that you can actually provide. So yet another reason, popularity of these developer platforms, for why there's a huge demand for developer focused businesses and services right now. A common argument is that, why should we bother? Like, aren't companies like Amazon or Google or Microsoft, all these big companies, can't they do everything better? Like, how can we even hope to compete with these companies? And the answer is, maybe you don't need to compete with them. Maybe like you can carve out a niche for yourself. The truth is that there is, with the advent of cloud, a lot of the focus of these large players, large technology players, is on big enterprise IT, So there is plenty of room for underserved audience and underserved scenarios. And examples could be individual developers who are just looking to learn and create their own passion projects, or just run their own personal applications for learning before they are ready to hit big time. Or even startups, small and medium businesses, efforts of large cloud providers, large technology providers are not focused on these underserved audiences, and that's where the opportunity lies. Similarly, large companies, large cloud providers tend to optimize for horizontal scenarios that are broadly applicable. So they may miss small niche scenarios, which may sound like a small task, but could be performed at a very high scale by a number of people. Perfect examples: Stripe did that for payment infrastructure. Twilio did that for communication infrastructure. These problems could very well have been solved by the likes of AWS or Microsoft or Google, but they were not, but only because they were busy elsewhere. And by the time they realized that these are big opportunities, companies like Twilio and Stripe were big enough in their own right, and now are the leaders in their own categories. So, long story short, just by having the right focus on your audience that you can super serve, and the right scenario in which you can provide, differentiated value is where the opportunity actually lies. And just if you were not convinced with all those numbers and with all that commentary, you'll probably listen to some of the top venture capitalist companies in the world who are pouring not only their hearts but also their wallets into these private cloud companies. Forbes comes out with a list of top 100 private cloud companies every year, and this year they came out with the list last month. And by the way, quick plug, DigitalOcean sits very prominently on that list as well. But the point is that if you look at that list, about 20% of those companies are those that actually focus on developers and developers' needs, and are making big business just by providing APIs, services, tools to developers to be able to build their applications in a more meaningful way. So if these wise people are putting their money in these developer focused businesses, clearly goes to demonstrate that it is a significant opportunity. And then the obvious question after all that commentary about how big of this opportunity is this the right opportunity for you? Why should you do it? And I think the answer to that would be because you are a developer. You know developers because you are one. It is very easy for a lot of us to just fall into this notion that in order to build a developer focused company, you need to be doing something magical, or you need to be doing something really, really complex, like building an application platform, building a really massive cloud service, or CI/CD platforms, some kind of APIs, automation. And the reality is that not necessarily. As developers, you solve problems on a daily basis. You add developer value, not just to the products you're working on, but also to the tools and processes that you use in building those things on a daily basis. It could be automation of some kind, cron jobs, shortcuts in your favorite tools, writing how-to documentation, building sample code, writing down things about how to do unconventional things on platforms which are not even documented by those platform providers. These are all potentially useful things, not just for you, not just for your inner circle, but for a lot of developers out there in the world. And just by creating some kind of an offering around even these small things and just putting it out for the world to consume, you can actually very quickly discover if there is an appetite for that among your fellow developers and other, like, maybe even companies that have developers inside them. So that's the reason why you should actually explore. Do not keep your small little innovation to yourself. Think of productizing it, putting it out there in the world, maybe initially as an open source project, and then eventually as a service that you can actually charge for to other developers. And then another thing that we have as developers sometimes is that we tend to think that any problem that we think of has been solved in the past. It's like nothing I'm thinking of is significant enough. Nothing I'm working on is new, or it's everything is formulaic. Everything comes from the past. The reality is that they used to say source control is a solved problem. If the founders of GitHub had that mindset, we would not have seen GitHub today. The whole concept of GitHub, Git initially and GitHub later on, would not have happened with that mindset. So there's not a single developer in the world today who does not know about Git or GitHub. And it has kind of proven that, you take an old problem, approach it with a new mindset, and there are opportunities to be created outside of that. And then there's another thinking that, why can't AWS, Microsoft, and Google, why can't they do a better job of everything? They have the resources, they have the time, energy to be able to do everything better than what anyone else can do. And then along came companies like DigitalOcean, Stripe, and Twilio, fitting squarely in where these companies should have come. So DigitalOcean, came in after all the established cloud providers and carved out a niche for themselves by focusing squarely on the needs of developers, startups, and small and medium businesses. Stripe, Twilio, as I said earlier, are solving very niche problems around payments or around communications. These are all problems that needed to be solved and could have been solved by AWS, could have been solved by Google, but they were just too busy elsewhere. So, continues to prove that the opportunities are there despite big competitors being in the market. Another common thing is there is no money in it. Maybe this small technology that I'm building is good enough as an open source technology. I'll put it out there for good, which is good. You should always start with that. But then companies like MongoDB have proven that you can get creative not just with your technology but also with your business model. And there is good business to be made from these open source technologies as well. So the list goes on and on. You can find, even looking at the Forbes 100 list, you can find several examples that are very similar to the ones that I just talked about. The opportunities are there. You just have to think deep and hard enough about what you are doing can add value, how it can add value to other developers. And also, just look at the development processes, the kind of applications that are being built around you, and think about how they can be made better. Like what parts of the workflow, what parts of the economics can actually be improved, and you'll start seeing opportunities there. Obvious question then, why build a developer-focused business on DigitalOcean? Why not anywhere else? There are a number of cloud providers, the big ones, the small ones, the niche ones. Why DigitalOcean? And this is my favorite part, obviously. I work for DigitalOcean. The reason I would say, very humbly, is that we are different. And the reason why we are different is because we exist for developers. We love developers. That's how the company has grown, by focusing on the needs of developers and their productivity, making cloud computing more accessible and more available to developers. And we love developers who serve developers even more. So there's that shared ethos of serving the common audience, which is the developers, It's a part of our DNA. It just lives with us all the time. So I think, like, I'm with a lot of humility, I'd like to say that developers is in our DNA, and we are different because we exist for developers. Our promise, I can easily say that there are just 3 pillars to the promise that we make to our core audience: developers, entrepreneurs, and SMBs. The first one is simplicity, and simplicity is the hardest thing to get right, and we actually have gotten it right. The simplicity of user experience, and the simplicity of pricing, the simplicity of billing. You'll see that one of the common things that we hear from our customers is that we just have the right set of products, nothing more, nothing less. Everything is where it needs to be. We will never have 175,000 different products and services like many of our competitors do, but we will not be outdone on simplicity. We will not have a service that you can use to manage the satellites running around Earth, but we will provide you the right level of tools, applications, and services to be able to build your applications with utmost ease. Similarly, around pricing, standard pricing for both our compute as well as bandwidth, flat wherever in the world you are. Second pillar is around service, and when I say service, I do not necessarily mean the email alias for support that you can send an email to, or the customer ticketing system. What I mean by service is like feeling that you are supported by a global community around you, whether it is developers who are doing things on DigitalOcean, who are available all the time to be able to answer your questions. The strong ecosystem that we have created around our tools, our processes, our APIs, the huge amounts of documentation and tutorials that we put out for you to tackle any kind of system administration, development, cloud computing problems that you might face, and the question and answer forums that we very feverishly maintain and manage so that we can answer all your questions as and when they arise. All of these things are a part of our service. And lastly, scale. The thing around scale is that not only you should be able to scale your applications and your business on your cloud, but you should be able to do it meaningfully and with the right economics. One common thing that we hear from a lot of our customers is that they started their journey on some of the cloud, but as their applications grew, as they were beginning to scale, they started to bleed money. And that's when they realized that there are all these hidden costs with these other cloud providers that they can easily avoid by just coming to DigitalOcean. So being able to scale as much as you want through our very elastic compute services, as well as doing it in an economic manner, that's the promise that we have around scale. A quick word around our product portfolio. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all the different products that we have, but one thing that we can very comfortably claim is that irrespective of where you are on this spectrum, if you are someone who's very comfortable with building your applications by managing your entire infrastructure yourself, your VMs, your networking, your storage, and just deploying your applications, your services onto these virtual machines, which we call Droplets, there's a place for you. If you are somebody who's looking to jump into more modern ways of building applications using containerized workloads, container orchestration tools like Kubernetes, and all the associated machinery there, which we all know how popular it is. We have managed services around Kubernetes and around container registry, and it works with all the tools in the Kubernetes ecosystem so that you can continue to use the tools that you use elsewhere and bring your workloads to our Kubernetes service. And lastly, if you are somebody who just wants to focus on your code and your applications and doesn't want to deal with infrastructure management, patching, and all those things, then we have our fully managed services, both for compute as well as databases and storage, for you to just compose your applications together by bringing your code and letting us take care of all the underlying infrastructure machinery. So our promise there is developers of any scale, full stack, up stack, down stack, irrespective of what kind of skills you have. you have a place here in DigitalOcean, and apps of any scale. If there are personal blogs that you might want to run for yourself, personal portfolio sites, or even large applications, large real-time communication applications serving millions of users, we have all of those applications running on a cloud today. So developers of any scale, apps of any scale are welcome in DigitalOcean. Now, I just want to provide some inspiration to you by just giving examples of some developer-focused companies that have done great things on DigitalOcean. The first one is this customer that we have called URLbox. What they have built essentially is a screenshots as a service. It's a bootstrapped company. They are a profitable company already, and they provide you an API in which you can just enter a URL, and the API emits and a screenshot image of that URL, whatever that website is. And as you can see from the quote, they very much like the Kubernetes service that we provide. It costs about half of one of our larger competitors, and they're very pleased with the support experience that they've gotten on our platform as well. So it's just, even the idea of this business is something that should tell you that creating screenshots of web pages in an automated manner is a business. So it can get as creative as that in terms of providing APIs. The second business I would like to talk about is Parabol. And what they focus on is providing remote meeting platforms for agile teams. And especially, as you can imagine, during the pandemic, when you cannot really do your agile retrospectives using post-it notes, all of that activity, like everything else in our lives, right now is happening through video tools, remote meetings, and so on. So Parabol kind of recognized that opportunity and created a product, created a service to be able to allow remote agile teams to still do their retrospectives. And this goes on to prove that, my earlier point around, you don't necessarily need to build something like a compiler or a library or an API. It could be something that improves the life of developers through better integration within their workflows, or just by rethinking how an existing step could be made better in the light of new circumstances in our world or in our environments. All of those are potential opportunities that you can tap into, even in the developer space. And an example there of what this customer likes about DigitalOcean is the fact that they are able to focus on their application. They don't have to deal with all the DevOps machinery. They are able to just focus on creating the features that they want to for their applications. And lastly, this is a great customer that we have called Scraper API. What they have built is an API for creating web crawlers. It's a block resistant API. They use multiple IP addresses so that your web crawlers, if you're using this API, are not blocked by websites. Again, a bootstrap company, very fast growing company. They actually graduated from our Hatch program. Hatch program, if some of you don't know, is the DigitalOcean program for startups, as a part of which we offer many benefits, including credits to early stage startups. And again, a great example of an API that they have exposed running on top of DigitalOcean Kubernetes service. And I love this quote. DigitalOcean was very attractive because of its simplicity. And everything is where it needs to be, nothing more, nothing less. As a former product manager, there is no better compliment that somebody can give you for a product experience. So again, hopefully those examples give you an idea of what is possible, what are some of the creative solutions that you could be creating, and just focusing on the needs of developers. The sky is your limit. Hopefully, that inspires you if you already have some business that is focusing on developers and their needs, please bring it to DigitalOcean. We'd love to work with you. And if you do not have one, right now may not be a bad time to start. My name is Raman again, and I can be reached at that Twitter handle. I would love to engage with you anytime. either in the Discord channel or through Twitter using that handle. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the conference.